Welcome, those of you who are here and popping in to the January MedTech Innovation Forum. I'm Tuni Schartner, the Executive Director of District Hall and Venture Cafe Providence. We are always excited to dive into each month's MedTech Innovation Forum that we do in partnership with Ximedica and NEMIC. As most of you here know, since 2014, Ximedica has conducted this meeting as an internal monthly information sharing platform to inform its employees about the newest medical related technologies in the public domain, with the intent to spur creative ideas and innovative thinking in their work. As a company that partners with leading medical device, pharmaceutical, and diagnostics companies to design, that was a tongue twister, sorry about that, develop and manufacture solutions for the healthcare market. District Hall Providence, we opened in 2019. We're right around the corner from NEMIC. And we support startups, innovators, and small businesses by providing them with free and open workspace, private meeting rooms and event spaces, and tons of engaging free programming that supports entrepreneurship and innovation, including our signature Venture Cafe Thursday gathering, which is part of the reason why we had an issue today. We're running that at the same time we're running this, so apologies again. Before we get started, I'd like to turn this over to our partners, Danielle from NEMIC, and our partners at Ximedica.
Awesome, thanks, Tuni. Really quickly, I think a lot of people on here I know pretty well, but I'm Danielle Sturm, Marketing Communications Manager at NEMIC, and we are a MedTech Venture Studio located in Providence, Rhode Island, and we support MedTech startups from all over the world develop their businesses in the US, prepare for fundraising, and bring their MedTech ideas forward to successful commercialization. I was going to share a little bit about a hackathon we're putting on in March and April, but I'll hold off and maybe do it at the end of this event to see if we have some more people coming on, but I'll send the link in the chat if anyone wants to look into attending the hackathon. I know that we are collaborating with a lot of organizations in the area, including Ximedica, and I believe Ayan Bandari, who is an employee with you guys, is going to be working with us very closely on this hackathon. So we'd love to have some more Ximedicans join us on it. And I'll share a little bit more with you guys at the end of this event. And I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thanks, Danielle. And thanks, Tuni, for such a wonderful overview. We're running short of time, so I would just thank everybody for attending. And I'm going to hand it over to the star of the show, which is Jessica Peach. Jessica.
So for those joining for the first time, we cover a bunch of different categories, primarily focused in the medtech space, listed out here. We do have a lot of technologies that overlap, and this month we have a lot of content that's pulling from CES, the Consumer Electronics Show that actually happened last week. And as more press releases come as a result of that show, they'll be folded into the February forum as well. So let's jump in. Okay, so materials. This first technology is both material sensor and a sensor device. If you've been on these tech forums before, you know how much I love graphene, and this is another example of why graphene has so many uses and so much value. Delft University and another university in the Netherlands have partnered together to develop a graphene gas sensor. It's 1 atom thick, which is one of the amazing characteristics of graphene. It can get really, really thin. It's able to withstand a tremendous amount of force that would be required to filter and detect gases. And so there's small perforations in these kind of graphene balloons allow for pressurized gases to escape at measurable speeds based on the mass of the gas and its molecular velocity. And so as a result, they can start to really measure different types of gases as a result. So helium has a high molecular velocity and escapes at a 5 times faster rate than, for example, krypton. And so these new types of gases could help us detect noble gases at a microscopic scale, particularly useful in industrial settings, but you can imagine them in the medical space, as well as in home for much more sensitive sensors in the home as well. Okay, the next material is also a diagnostic. We've seen some very sophisticated contact lenses in the past. Well, Terasaki Institute has developed a diagnostic contact lens made pretty purely from hydrogel. They've basically developed a formula playing with standard contact hydrogel to make it much more elastic. And so that the actual properties of hydrogel is great because it holds its shape when it's molded, and that means it can fit more comfortably over the eye. And as you can see on this visual, that the mold has these tiny raised ridges on its surface, which create microchannels that can be enclosed with another layer of hydrogel over it to essentially create tunnels. And within each microchannel, there could be a tiny well that contains a reagent chemical that can change color when it's exposed to a biomarker condition. Imagine high glucose for a diabetic in tear fluids. And so the net result is a contact lens that can be a diagnostic that's both comfortable to wear and as well as inexpensive to manufacture. So expect our eyeballs to start changing color as we have high glucose levels. It'd be pretty interesting in terms of conversation. Maybe you shouldn't have that second donut. So the next material is also pretty mind-blowing in terms of its implications, both in terms of energy and how we might use a natural gas in different forms. The National University of Singapore have figured out how to take natural gas, which we all understand to be in a gas form, and put it into a solid state. And of course, natural gas is a key energy source for us, and but the challenge is it's quite difficult and dangerous to store as well as to transport. When it's stored in its liquid form, it requires a significant cold storage condition of -260 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we can get it into a solid state, with this academic team, they figured out how to trap it into cages of water molecules. Now, nature does this on its own, but it takes millions of years, which is not really quite what we're working with here. So this particular academic team have found a way to use a particular type of amino acid called L-tryptophan to speed up the reaction in taking 1 million years and putting it into 15 minutes. It's really quite incredible. So the end product looks essentially like a block of ice, but it's taking the volume of gas and shrinking it by 90 times. And in that state, it's non-explosive, good thing, and can be stored at 23 degrees Fahrenheit. In pretty easy to store kind of refrigeration conditions, basic refrigeration conditions. This next material is called a magnetic replicator, and one of our system engineers, Leonard Silverman, flagged this one for us, coming out of an academic team in Italy. So this discovery reveals a way to create and cancel magnetic fields remotely. And how it works is you're running an electric current through an array of wires, and there's an active metamaterial that's creating a magnet field that seems remote, kind of like a ventriloquist throwing its voice. And with a magnetic permeability of a -1, the direction of the magnetism can be induced within the material, and it becomes at the opposite direction of the initial magnetic field. It kind of sounds quite confusing as I'm trying to explain it, and the visual really doesn't help that much. Essentially what the visual is showing us is a long wire surrounded by the magnetic replicator that generates a replication of the magnetic field outside of the core. So they're thinking this could be quite useful for particularly targeting precisely an area of a tumor for delivering a cancer drug, or even stimulating parts of the brain to treat depression, because you can essentially have the magnetic field in a different place from where it's actually going to have an effect. All right, moving into sensors. This first product is in the field of kind of elderly care support for those who are aging in place in their homes. This is a lamp that is able to, it has a bunch of different features, including being able to detect when a person falls in their home. And if that person is not able to respond to the lamp asking them, are you okay? Do you need help? It will then call for an emergency service if that is deemed necessary. The lamp has an integrated camera and artificial intelligence, which informs imaging processing on the device itself. So that means that any video it's collecting isn't actually sent to the cloud. And so you're kind of, as a user, you can worry less about kind of your own video of your own home, maybe your own bedroom or your own bathroom, being secure and private. Within the device, it has 4 RGB motion sensors and an infrared light, so it can detect movement in a dark room without having to turn on the light. And it can automatically illuminate if it detects movement, for example, someone getting out of bed to use the bathroom at night. It also has a number of other features in terms of being able to detect for fire, monitor air quality, and even recognize a burglary in progress. It's really quite expensive as a lamp. to install, as well as a monthly subscription. But for those folks who are concerned about their loved ones at home, this might be the ticket. They're planning for EU launch in this first quarter of this year. All right, this is coming out of CES. This is called Themis by Barracoda, which is a French company. Jeanette, one of our innovation folks at Ximedica, flagged this one for us. This is a smart mirror that has an integrated display and a number of cameras and sensors in it that enables you, when you're standing in front of the mirror, to perform a temperature check and understand the kind of status of your health. And I think where the most interesting aspect of this mirror is it can perform skin analysis with UV lights, and also even offer personalized makeup sessions, including tutorials about how to apply the new lipstick or the new eyeshadow. The device also it has voice commands as to support touchless interaction. And there's also magnification capability and time-lapse video features so that you can potentially see yourself getting younger or getting older if that was something that was interesting to you. They're in final development, planning for launch later this year. Right, another CES invention. This is called the Glucose Monitor Smartwatch by Quantum Operation in Japan. We've actually seen some technology similar to this, and it looks awfully like an Apple Watch that's currently out there today. But this technology is designed to exclusively focus on monitoring glucose using spectrometry. So this is a technology where a light is shined through the skin to the bloodstream and is able to essentially continuously monitor glucose without the need of a needle finger stick, which is really the big desire for all glucose patients. So the user presses a monitoring option on the watch menu to get a glucose result in up to just a very quick 20 seconds. The problem is that this company is going to have is that Apple Watch explored this technology in the past and filed a whole bunch of patents around their own inventions, but they shelved it because of the poor accuracy of the spectrometry technique. And so this company is in the early stages, and of course this prototype looks like it's been banged around quite a bit and needs a bit of work, but they're going to have to really prove out their accuracy and then get around the Apple patents. I'll let you know if they do. So another diagnostic is called Lumo, and this comes from my alma mater at University College London. This is a way to study the infant brain. Currently, the ways that we do this conventionally is using traditional MRI scanners, but trying to keep your baby still in an MRI scanner ain't gonna work. So this is a wearable cap that uses something called high definition diffuse optical tomography. As you can see on the image in the middle there, it's kind of a series of hexagonal tiles that create these LED sources and have sensors built into them. Infrared light is used to detect changes in brain oxygenation, and which in turn is working with the brain in terms of real time. They've tested this on 6-month-old babies and can image brain function with a better spatial resolution than the traditional solutions such as MRI. They are planning a spin-off company called Gower Labs, and if you've been to UCL, Gower Street is the main thoroughfare of the campus. So that's a very cool name, makes me smile at least. We might expect to see this further. And of course, as we understand brain development in children, it can really make a difference to learning and better understanding the amazing aspects of the brain. And I love on that picture that the mum has an equivalent cap so the baby doesn't feel too freaked out by the fact they're wearing this thing on their head. Empathic design. Okay, the next sensor also is in the context of user interaction, cyber shoes. So if those of you who are gamers, you will potentially know the frustration of playing a very full body interaction game, but your feet have to be permanently planted on the floor, even though your avatar is moving around in different spaces. Well, this footwear allows you to engage at a higher level in terms of having motion sensors related to your feet. So this has a series of sensors and rollers to track movements in the leg and feet, and is designed obviously for VR interactions. You really should be seated using this thing, but the shoes act as a kind of treadmill, so that the users can move while staying in one place. Really quite extraordinary. The accessories, so they fit over traditional shoes, and they communicate with the VR headset that you're also wearing. There's a battery built into these things that lasts for 8 hours. Can't imagine playing a video game for 8 hours, but talk to my 17-year-old son and he'd have a different opinion. Available for just under $400, and they're looking for Kickstarter funding. So if you're willing to engage, you might get it for cheaper, but they're planning to deliver it in April. All right, in the field of kind of robotics, but also sensors, this is called the Smellicopter by University of Washington. And what they're trying to do is develop a drone that can detect and navigate to a certain smell. Now, there's a particular types of, what I learned from this, this article is that moths actually have a very finely tuned sense of smell, because they have this very sophisticated antenna that's feathery, and so that makes it highly sensitive, and that allows for the moth to scan for smells and move towards them. And so what this drone has done is essentially harvest an antenna from a tobacco hawk moth, and using a suite of electronics, hook up that antenna to guide the drone towards a specific scent. The moth that donated its antenna was anesthetized, so that the antenna had still was able to stay biologically and chemically stable for up to 4 hours. So the drone has essentially a 4-hour lifetime, so long as you have enough moths to harvest from. So in their series of experiments, this drone in fact was able to detect a smell and then fly towards it. You know, obviously this has implications for finding people in rubble in kind of an explosive or kind of bomb scene, but also could be used by the military in particular, looking for explosives as an example. Another robotic, we kind of featured some worm-like robots in the past. This is a soil monitoring robot developed by Cornell University. It's about 2 feet in length and is inspired by an earthworm. It's designed to collect and evaluate soil quality, particularly for agricultural purposes. There's a mechanism in the front that drills, while the rear section kind of pushes, is a mechanical motion that pushes the whole thing forward. So dislodging soil as it goes to create a tunnel, just like a worm would do. And the effort to move through the ground determines the density of the soil. There are sensors on board to measure temperature and humidity, and there are fiber optic cables to image plant roots and identify microorganism activity, also a sign of soil health. The data on board can be retrieved later for inspection and analysis, and one of these robots could be deployed on an entire field of maize crop. So it might be interesting for those farmers that are really trying to figure out how to improve their soil quality. All right, the next system is a robot that is promising precision surgery for a direct competitor to Da Vinci. It's designed to work with any laparoscopic tools, as opposed to with Da Vinci's designed to work for only the Da Vinci instrumentation. What it claims to do is improve precision, dexterity, and ergonomics, just like any of the other robots that are out there. It's designed to be easily moved in and out of the surgical space, so versatile enough to be part of the procedure, but then still allow the surgeon to kind of get up from the console, grab the tools in their own hands and move them and use them more manually if that's needed during the surgery. So you could have a minimally invasive surgery that is both laparoscopic and robotic and maybe open if need be. It has the ability to raise or lower like a standing desk, so the surgeon can work with the system at a seated or standing position. And it's also been designed to use its own single-use 8mm instruments for specifically dissecting and suturing. They've gotten CE mark approval coming out of Switzerland. So this is an example of how the robotic surgical space is really changing and morphing and trying to be a direct competitor with Da Vinci. There's a lot of these guys out there that are coming to the market imminently. This UI is an interesting, this UI invention is interesting in terms of its applications for things like electronic payments, called the Electro-Quasi-Static Human Body Communication Tool by Purdue. They're in a kind of prototype stage, obviously, as you can tell from the image here, that imagines the ability to be able to wear a wrist-like device that ensures secure payments, or the holding of passwords, or even holding of photography, and being able to deliver that through a single touch, kind of like Apple Payments, where you're taking your phone and touching it to the pad, but now, in fact, the signal is actually being held by the human body. Bear with me for a second. So this is a low power electromagnetic field that's transmitting the data through the body. So essentially it's making it hard for hackers to intercept. So when your finger, if you're wearing this device, comes in contact with the receiver, the image, the device on the right here, the connection is created for the data to travel across. So it has to be very much user conscious thought to put my finger to the thing that I want to activate as a way to kind of gain a higher level of security. We'll see. The next, moving into diagnostics, this is a sensor device in the context of glucose monitoring. So we saw the wristwatch earlier. This is the idea of taking the same basic premise, but sending a light through the earlobe. Obviously, that's a much more sensitive place in the body, to track blood glucose levels. And potentially the way it could be designed could be quite discreet. This has actually been developed by a grad student at University of Huddersfield in England, up north in the northern part of the country. And it works by pulsating high frequency radio waves through the earlobe to measure blood sugar in real time, and deliver that readings to a smartphone. So I could see this being fairly intuitive for folks who do wear earrings, but for those who aren't really accustomed to wearing, I mean, maybe it could be a little bit more like designed for an earpiece for those folks who are comfortable moving into that space and having something around their ears on an ongoing basis. Doesn't mention what the other ear would be, whether it would be a replica, but a dummy essentially of the same thing. Is it okay to have one earpiece? There's some things to definitely be exploring there with that grad student. Okay, the next diagnostic is taking the idea of doing an eye exam, but now at home. So this device combines a smartphone attachment with an app to provide personalized eye tests. The user attaches an optical scope over their smartphone, and through the scope, the user sees two colored lines, which so that they are instructed to move closer together or further apart using buttons on the scope. And the pixel movement that they're doing based on what they're seeing through through their eye corresponds to the refractive correction that's needed for each eye. An algorithm determines the lens power needed to correct either near sight or far sight or astigma. And then it presents the result in a way that can be used as a traditional prescription. The system also is able to measure the distance between the center of user eyes, so that the glasses that you do order, presumably through IQ, are a good fit. The cost of the device is $57, and through the Kickstarter fund, with a $29 annual subscription, assuming that you need to measure your eyes at least once a year. Another at-home device, this came out of COVID. They promoted this at CES. Omron has developed essentially a kit called Vitalcite, which combines both an Omron blood pressure monitor and a weight scale directly to a clinical EMR electronic medical record through a wireless hub that is part of the kit. So a person at home can also take their blood measurement and stand on the scale, and those readings are then automatically recorded and uploaded through a very seamless interaction with a wireless hub. And where there are abnormal readings, that triggers an alert to the clinician who's responsible for that patient's EMR. Omron has put in a lot of effort to ensure that the setup is very easy. Thinking about some of the users who might need to use this are have comorbidities, they're elderly, and the idea of setting up a wireless network or connecting to another wireless network, and they're saying, oh, I can't be bothered, or I don't know how to, or I'm overwhelmed by the step. What this kit does is it's actually just simply plugging in the wireless hub into a power outlet, and everything else automatically pairs. And so they've really put a lot of effort into making that a frictionless experience. The data is routed in real time to the correct patient's EMR. So the next time they see their doctor, that doctor has a whole bunch of data to be able to assess on an ongoing basis the health of that patient. COVID has definitely prompted the need for more at-home diagnostic tests and kits like that. So I would expect us to see more in the next few months, and the need probably won't go away after COVID does. So this next diagnostic is for couples who are struggling with IVF to get pregnant. This is an acoustic wave sperm selection by an Australian academic team. This device is able to isolate the good sperm from the weaker ones to then essentially create a sperm collection that is going to be much more effective for generating pregnancy. So as you may have seen, or you may already know, IVF is a very expensive thing to take on, and it has very limited success, which is very frustrating for couples. So this tech uses standing acoustic waves to essentially separate sperm in clinically relevant numbers in an efficient and safe manner by using, instead of using conventional centrifuging and washing methods, which are actually quite cumbersome, quite labor intensive, and also can damage the quality of that good sperm. This device applies this acoustic field at a specific angle to the flow direction being pushed through a channel. And that sperm with substantial DNA integrity, the strong guys, gets separated into a microchannel reservoir, which can then be harvested for IVF. All right, moving into therapy devices, the Prevena Restore Axioform by 3M is expanding the company's portfolio into negative pressure wound therapy. So negative pressure wound therapy, or NPWT, is what's typically given to patients when they are sedentary for a long period of time after surgery, recovering in the ICU, for example. And this particular system has expanded the duration of which negative pressure can be applied to a wound or an incision for now up to 14 days. I believe it was 7 days before. So the system is designed to incorporate both larger wounds, and it has a disposable dressing. And it can also work for sutured and stapled surgical incisions as well. They're the only negative pressure system to receive FDA indication for the reduction of seromas, as well as specifically for surgical site infections post-op. So they have a kind of market claim that is a USP for them. David Copeland, one of our industrial design directors, flagged this one for us. This is the Capo by Corneat. This is a corneal implant, and they're in human clinical trials currently, and one of their first subjects, a legally blind 78-year-old man, was given the ability to see as a result of this implant. The implant is kind of unique in that it's integrated directly into the eye wall without to replace essentially a scarred or deformed cornea without having to use donor tissue. The procedure is actually quite remarkable in that it involves minimal stitches and cutting. And immediately after the procedure, this particular 78-year-old patient was able to recognize loved ones and read numbers on an eye chart, despite the fact that prior to the procedure, he was legally blind. Pretty remarkable. The implant uses biomimetic material that simulates cellular proliferation and tissue integrations to ensure faster healing and minimizes any kind of trauma associated with attachment. So they're expanding their clinical trials. Currently they're in Israel and Canada, and they're rolling out to a number of other markets, not the US though yet. So disabilities. Ikea is a company that has a lot of very cool and hip furniture. Sometimes it's difficult to build, but they have integrated with Lean Foundation and Lecker Architects, who are both based in Singapore, to support something called Hack Care. And this is a series of furniture adaptations to the Ikea furniture for those folks who have dementia. This is a population that's expected to grow globally by 32 million in the next 9-10 years. So the series of furniture is essentially a 244-page catalog that describes easy hacks to IKEA furniture to support a patient with dementia. So there's an adapted chair, and there's a fidget board, as you can see on this area of the photograph here, and there's a shelving care unit that can support a patient around their chair to have everything that they would typically need in the course of 2 to 3 hours. It's all within access within this shelving unit. It's a pretty interesting, relatively simple in terms of it as an invention, but it's a pretty interesting way to kind of explore taking and adapting an existing kind of series of products and in a furniture catalog and making it relevant to a particular patient population. Drug delivery. Adhere IT is a technology invention that we featured a few years ago. But they are now able to achieve commercial availability. Noble and Aptar Pharma is the kind of partnership. This is an auto injector that is the first interchangeable connected digital ecosystem. It has the ability to work across a multitude of disease platforms. Diabetes is one, pulmonary disease, skin issues like psoriasis, and is specifically designed to address poor medication adherence as it relates to injections. In one of the studies that's been done, those patients with psoriasis, about 45% of them end up discontinuing their treatments for a number of reasons. For example, they've had insufficient training, or they lack confidence in giving themselves an injection, or the whole process just leaves them feeling very anxious that they're even doing it right, and a high sense of lack of control. And so what this system is doing is pairing the patient's mobile phone with real-time instruction through the steps of giving yourself an injection. It's giving you feedback cues, so it's able to detect when you press the device against the skin. It's able to detect when the injection has been delivered in real time. And it's also pushing reminders of when your next injection is due, as well as tracking and communicating back to HCPs. So this is the first actual auto injector that's actually taking the idea of medication adherence and actually trying to solve for it. I would expect more and more devices to kind of be in this realm as we proceed forward. All right, COVID is one of our last categories. There are 3 or 4 different masks that have come to market. Several were actually featured in CES last week. This first one's called the Active Halo Smart Mask by AirPop. Jeanette flagged this one for us. This is a cloth mask that has a sensor in it that monitors your breathing pattern from inside the mask and gives you information on the air quality that you're pulling into the mask through the pod that's on the side of the device. It's made from an air knit material, so that it's ensured kind of comfort and breathability and kind of a lightweight, but still protective. And it comes with a series of filters that are effective for 48 hours of wear time, commercially available for just $70. The next mask, called Breeze by NextVu, also launched at CES. This is a transparent mask, and it has 2 fans that are supposedly silent, that circulate and filter the air as it passes through the space of the nose and mouth. It also has a UV light to disinfect the mask while it's charging. And it's made from medical grade silicone, which gives it its transparency to ensure kind of comfort and safe and secure fit. The charge is via USB connection and will be worn for 6 hours of continual use for $80 or just under $80. And then the third mask, developed by Razer, which is a video game company, takes the whole thing, premise of masks, and takes it up just yet another level. When I just think about my cloth masks that are pretty basic, I now feel very minimized by all of this technology. But this mask is both transparent and has active ventilation like the previous one, but it also has a built-in microphone and speakers and an amp to even clarify speech, so that that muffled mask sound is minimized. It also has light rings around the vent pods that light up into your choice of different colors and can be programmed with lighting effects like breathing pulsations to show that you are actually still breathing. The mask also has a low light mode, and which includes interior lighting to illuminate the face so it's visible at night, so that people can still see your lips moving or your great lovely smile even at night time. The mask comes with a hard case and uses UV light in that case to keep the components clean. Also launched at CES. But obviously it has video game implications as well. That's why you would need such a lovely, fantastic mask. All right, there have been a number of diagnostic tests for COVID that come out recently that are exponentially really pushing the envelope in terms of the capabilities. So this is a rapid COVID test that uses an enzyme to cleave the viral RNA from a nasal swab. It uses fluorescent signal that can be identified objectively by a smartphone camera to measure if viral particles are present. And the test presents a result in 30 minutes without the need for expensive lab equipment. The system works with gene editing CRISPR-Cas technology, which was originally developed to detect HIV in blood samples, and they've retrofitted it for COVID. UC Berkeley developed that one. Tulane, another academic team, have also developed their own saliva COVID smart test that uses a saliva sample to produce results in 15 minutes. So each one is exponentially saying, oh, we're better than your guys. This also uses CRISPR technology to detect and amplify the RNA signal. There's an assay solution that's mixed with saliva on a special chip, which is heated as part of the system. And that heating amplifies the COVID RNA. And then the fluorescent signals, just like on the previous technology, can be read by a smartphone to present the results. And then the last COVID test, this is actually an antibody test developed by Carnegie Mellon to determine whether you've been exposed to COVID and you just didn't know it. This is a microfluidic lab on the chip, if you will, that rapidly tests for COVID antibodies to a very high sensitivity, so being able to detect low concentrations of antibodies in just a drop of blood. So a finger stick is involved. The results are sent to a smartphone and is available within 10 seconds. So really pretty darn quick. How this technology has actually been developed is kind of interesting in terms of the process. They've used an aerosol jet nanoparticle 3D printing. So essentially spraying the particles through a 3D printer to create gold micropillar electrodes that, because of the spray, have a rough surface on them. And then that rough surface is essentially an increased surface area that enables the antibody binding of the antigens on the electrode surface. Those electrodes are coated with a reduced graphene oxide nanoflake, and then also immobilized viral antigens also apply to that surface. And so when an antibody is exposed or placed onto that electrode, it's highly sensitive. The device can detect as little as 0.15 nanograms per milliliter of blood of an antibody. Pretty remarkable. All right, in the other category, this robotic is called ReadySight by Sphero. Sphero, if you have opened up some of the kind of more widgets, invention catalogs that used to be around, they used to make robo ball toys. So send the ball away and it lights up and spins around and comes back to you. I think they made one that was related to a Star Wars movie a few years ago. But the Sphero company have developed a whole spin-off to develop small portable machines that can be used by first responders or even the military. So it can be thrown into a dangerous, difficult situation. and be able to evaluate that from a distance. It weighs about 1 pound, and it can roll over rugged terrain and turn sharply. The two different mechanisms move in opposite directions to enable that turn. And it can be thrown, and on landing both use autonomous and semi-autonomous navigation to go to where it needs to go on the ground, and also present live video feed back to a user's smartphone. All right, I definitely do not need this product in my home because it would be really dangerous, particularly for my New Year's resolutions. But Cold Snap by Sigma Phase is taking the premise of a Keurig-like pod that we know with coffee and maybe tea. It's also Keurig pods are being now used for developing cocktails and wine, and even actually full meals. But anyway, this inventor with his 2 daughters, I think that this comes out of Minnesota, have developed a device that gives you countertop freshly made ice cream. Each sealed pod contains a different flavor of either dairy or non-dairy ice cream or frozen treats in a liquid form. So it doesn't actually need to be kept in the refrigerator. That's one advantage of the pod. And those ingredients can be used to make smoothies, frozen yogurt, protein shakes, frozen cocktails. The user simply inserts the pod into the device and waits 60 to 90 seconds, and boom, you get your lovely, delicious frozen treats. It's $1,000 at the moment. It may get cheaper, maybe. With $2.99 per pod, maybe it could be that you can rationalize this might be something you need on your countertop. They won the CES Invention Board, which is a big deal. So maybe expect to see this in Bed Bath & Beyond sooner than we would like. All right, in the spirit of a new Biden administration, I felt that this had to go on here, even though it's not really an invention, but it's a beautiful thing. The Teeter-Totter Wall, developed by a artistic group called Collecto Tropique, was an art installation that took 10 years to realize. It was really pretty remarkable just for its resilience, the team's resilience. It was only allowed to remain in place for 20 minutes on July 28, 2019, and it's essentially a playground toy that was put into the gaps between the steel boundary that divides El Paso from Juarez in Mexico. And the goal of this artistic art project was to bring together communities on both sides of this very political border. That 20 minutes was enough time for children to play on the teeter-totter, but more importantly, the London Design Museum announced this project as the winner of the Beazley Design of the Year Award. It also won a Transport Award as well. Not quite sure that it's transport, but interesting nonetheless. All right, this is always my favorite category because it's the weirds and the wonderfuls. Leonard, also one of our system engineers, found this one for us. This is a hyperrealistic 3D mask. It has no COVID value whatsoever. But if you wanted to wear someone else's face for a day, you could do so. Kamenya Omote, that's the English version of a Japanese name. It's a retail store in, I believe it's Tokyo, that is known for its artistic masks developed for parties and for film and theater production. And this realtor has started producing these 3D face masks. They are so realistic that you look at the image in the middle here and think it's someone putting their own head through a hole in a piece of wood, but you know that it's not real because the printed eyes and the lips don't move. The store owner launched this project last October, and he did this because he was wanting to give people the ability to copy their face from their youth. So if you had a photograph of yourself when you were 21 and all non-wrinkly, you can now wear that 21-year-old face around if that was something that you want to do, or maybe for your 70th birthday. Or if you wanted to be able to change your face at will. This is very Mission Impossible to me. But how this technique works is you take a photograph and it's printed on a 3D surface in a super realistic way. As a party gimmick, it's probably not worth $750, but you will be able to buy these types of face masks starting in the spring this year. Really wonderful. Okay, this product tried to make it to market, but Indigo shut them down because they failed to demonstrate a functional prototype. Always an important thing to do as part of your development process. This product is called the Robotics, developed by a Swedish inventor. It is a set of robot arms that can be installed above your bed. No mention of how that installation happened and what the weight associated with these arms are, but it can be used to do all kinds of bed-related activities. Yes, including that one, but it includes making your bed, holding out a tray, nudging you awake in the morning, giving you a massage, and even reading the kids a bedtime story, handing you a glass of water off of a nightstand, and it even has a fire extinguisher that can be used for those very hot moments. And as I mentioned, Indigo has closed that funding campaign because they didn't demonstrate functionality in a prototype. But they were claiming that you could buy it for $2,000 plus at some point in the future. Moonmark is a project by Intuitive Machines planned for October. This is a race of different cars on the moon, RC cars, remote control cars. So 6 high school teams who are across the US are going to compete to be one of 2 teams to build and race a vehicle around a sphere of cameras that are going to be set up on the moon. They need to consider the development of their car, dust filtration, traction, weight, material stability, and oh yes, gravity. Each car is required to weigh 5.5 pounds and will travel to the moon in a Nova C lander on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. And they're going to be controlled from Earth via a Wi-Fi signal. I'm not sure how reliable that's going to be, despite the distance. So look out for this. I'm going to be very excited to read more about this and even maybe see it on video. I think it'll be very exciting. That's it for this week. We hold on to all these tech forums in an archive, occasionally mine them when it's needed for projects based on category. Our next innovation forum is planned for the 2nd Thursday of February. We're now going to go to a cadence of every 2nd Thursday to align with other activities that NEMIC and Venture Cafe are also doing. So if you need any links, here they are. Thank you everyone for your time.
Hi, Jess. Yeah, you know, I think, and Jeanette has like a good answer here, but I think I'll just kind of open it up to you, Jess, because I don't know if you've actually seen the chat at all. But I think so. For example, I think it was called the Nobi lamp, right? So that's something that Aiden and we taught a class, and our students actually came up with this about like 2 years ago, right? And their whole thing was how do we make sure our parents are okay? And like they're saying, oh, the lamp or like the light is right in the middle of the room, so it sees everything, and it can, in their case, they had like a bunch of sensors and some lights that could like, oh, where's my keys, and it would just like point at the keys. And I guess what I'm actually looking for is like a conversation between, what do we honestly think is the feasibility of this kind of stuff from a usability perspective, in the sense of like, do we really need this kind of innovation, or is it just really cool to do this kind of stuff and pick things out? And then B, it kind of seems like every time I jump on this call, which I'm unfortunately, I don't get as many opportunities, and anytime I can, I try to carve out and watch. It just seems like everyone's looking at some object in the house and saying, how do I make that smart, right? And is that really the trend we need to be working towards? Like, is that really important for our society? Or is it just the fact that they're sitting there and we go, how do I make a profit off of that in a connected world?
I absolutely agree. There's a lot of technologies that are looking for a need, and there isn't always a need there, particularly if the cost is $2,500 plus a monthly subscription. You'd have to really be concerned about your elderly loved one living at home, and then being also really concerned enough to have this device in their home. And despite the non-cloud storage of video, certain amount of skepticism and how much you're willing to be recorded all day long. Yes, I agree. I think it's very important for startups and your clients who come to Ximedica. It's one of the questions we ask at the very beginning stages is, what is the value here? What is the business premise? Who is going to end up being this user? Who is asking for this? What are the true unmet needs? And I think this particular technology is one that doesn't really meet that criteria.
The road to the promised land, Ian, is littered with disaster.
Yes.
No, I mean, it's a great, we see this stuff the whole time, and we've got companies coming into NEMIC all the time that are, and they haven't validated that somebody would actually use this. And it could be this one, it could be any number of different things. And that's where that sort of front-end validation process is really, really important. So yeah, it's not going to stop the human race though. They believe all sorts of things.
Yeah, no, it's very, I mean, like Jeanette, for example, puts like a really good reaction to my comment on the thread, and really says like, we have the sensors, right? So we can do amazing things, right? And when I look at this and I look at the cost and the, like Jess said, like the subscription and things, it just, somehow I just look at it and I take a step back and I take a deep breath and I go like, do we really, like, I get how cool this is and I get the application of the technology, but do we really need this as humanity? I don't know. I'm just not sure. And I think that's where I'm inspired and also very philosophical at this moment, looking through this, which is why I sign up for these forums anyway, is to have this thought in my head.
I think we have a responsibility as researchers, designers, and engineers to ask those questions and ask them as early as they can be asked to ensure that we're not collectively taking on effort that's going to end up creating more clutter and not much value.
Yeah, and it's funny because when my students did it, or Aiden and I students did it, we thought, oh, this is really cool. What a great idea. And then now that I see it in like reality, I go, well, is it? And it seems like it's for the same reason. So very interesting. Yeah, it's like, how, like you said, Jess, like, how do we ensure that we are taking the great technology that we are creating and we are ensuring that it goes into the right places and applying it the correct way? I don't think there's an answer, but it's very interesting to me.
Ian, it's similar in med devices, right? We have sometimes some really great ideas and some great concepts that are leveraging things that people see every day. And a lot of these tend to come from healthcare providers and physicians. Mm-hmm. But they're great ideas, great technology, but the commercial application is very questionable. And that's why, NEMIC is so important, because typically they're trying to raise funds. They're in that chicken and egg scenario where they've got a great idea, they're trying to raise funds, and they come to us. And of course, we can help them, so far on the commercialization aspect of it and mapping out potentially, sort of list price versus the cost of the general business side of it. But sometimes that's a shame because, it's like we just said, it's a great technology looking for an application rather than a need being pulled in from patients and other healthcare providers. So it's interesting. We see it every day, and that's half the fun of what we do at Ximedica. So good point.
Yeah. Actually, now that you say that, Mark, as you were kind of talking through that, I'm imagining now what we're seeing on the screen. If that was in a patient room, all of a sudden the application becomes very interesting, because now do you need a nurse to be kind of coming in? When I was a patient, I had like a really weird disease on my foot. Like I got a weird bug bite or something. And I ended up being in the hospital for 2.5 weeks. And as a designer, I was sort of like clocking every nurse, and I was like writing down, okay, how long did it take before she asked me something? What does she have to do when she comes in, or he has to do when he comes in? And now I think about, like, if you just had like a a device like this, if you replaced the bedroom with a patient room, all of a sudden it seems feasible to me based on what the technology is trying to do.
Straight away, you're thinking patient falls, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, does someone have to come in and check every 30 minutes? Because that's what was happening. Like, I never got a chance to actually rest, I think. I had a phlebotomist taking blood, then I had a nurse checking in, then I had to stand up and do X, Y, and Z. Then I had a cardiologist, and then I had a surgeon who was like, I'm going to cut off your foot, and I'm like, stay away from me. You know, it's like.
But to Mark's point, the price point here is, as an entrepreneur, to justify $2,500
yeah
per room per hospital. There's a company out of India called Dozy, who are a couple of ex-F1 Formula One guys who develop sensors, and they can shove a little flat piece of paper under your bed, and the number of things that it will tell you about what you're doing in bed is more alarming than Jessica's bed-making robot. Right, we better keep a level up here.
Yeah, no, right. There you go.
Thanks, Jess.
Great discussion. Thanks, Jess. Great forum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Sorry that I delayed that a little bit. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Discussion is good.
Discussion. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.